You are at a tiny comedy club on a Tuesday night, in a basement room that smells like spilled beer and old carpet. The person on stage is not funny, and the crowd is doing that polite thing where nobody quite commits. A few dry coughs, a phone coming up out of a pocket, somebody checking the time. Then the comic leans into the microphone, clears their throat, and drops the oldest bit in the world. It is a setup about a guy and his wife, and something nobody should have said out loud in front of dinner guests. The room wakes up. People elbow each other. Somebody snorts into their drink, and I can say, with a straight face, that 4,000 years from now, somebody is going to tell almost that exact same joke, in almost that exact same structure, and the room is going to react the same way. Comedy feels like the most modern thing we make. It is disposable. It is of the moment. It lives in memes that die inside a week and in late-night monologues that are dated by the time the show reruns. The whole industry runs on being current, on catching the mood before it evaporates, on landing a reference before the audience forgets the thing you are referencing. So it is completely natural to assume that humor is young, that the ancient world was grim and practical, too busy scraping a life out of the dirt to ever write a punchline. But that assumption is wrong in a way that should make us uncomfortable, because the oldest surviving jokes we have are not noble. They not clever in the way we call clever, and they are definitely not tasteful. They are crude. They about gas and old men and marriages and people getting caught doing something embarrassing, and that means the thing you laughed at on your phone this morning is almost certainly a remix, with a new coat of paint, of something a scribe carved into clay 4,000 years ago. By the time you finish this, you will never look at a meme the same way again. You'll see the internet not as a new invention, but as the latest delivery system for the oldest social technology we have. And I am going to prove it to you by showing you the actual punchlines ancient people wrote down, the ones they thought were worth the trouble of carving into stone. And I think you are going to cringe on their behalf, and maybe also recognize a thing or two you've. Here is the honest question hiding underneath all of this, and it is the question the whole video runs on. Do we laugh because jokes are good, or do we laugh because laughter is a need? Because if laughter is a need, then the jokes don't actually have to change that much. They just have to work. And working, in human terms, means landing the same small handful of punches over and over, for thousands of years, without anyone getting bored enough to stop doing it. Let's start with one of the oldest recorded jokes in the world, because it tells us almost everything there is to know about our species. It comes from ancient Sumer, a proverb written on clay tablets around 1900 BC, reconstructed from fragments scattered across museums. And it goes like this: something which has never occurred since time immemorial. A young woman did not fart on her husband. That is the joke. That is the whole thing. And before you dismiss it, notice what it is actually doing, because it is not just a rude line. It is a setup and a twist. The setup is a grand, biblical, solemn phrase about something that has never happened in human history. The twist is that the impossible miracle across all of time is a wife choosing not to fart on her husband. The humor lives in the gap between the enormous dramatic frame and the tiny, rude, domestic reality sitting inside it. That is structure. That is craft. And it is 4,000 years old. People who read cuneiform, the wedge-shaped writing of ancient Mesopotamia, have worked hard to figure out what the Sumerians found funny, and a lot of it reads as strange to us, because humor travels badly across 4 millennia, the same way a joke about last week's news travels badly across a border. But this particular one survives the trip intact because it is built on a primal, universal thing that nobody needs a decoder ring to understand. If we collect jokes across cultures, the way anthropologists have, we find the same handful of evergreen subjects everywhere you look. Sex, scatology, bodily functions, marriage, aging, and people in positions of power getting embarrassed. The Sumerian scribe hit at least 4 of those in a single line. And that efficiency is exactly why it is still legible to us after all this time. So here is a thought that should reframe your relationship with comedy. The crude joke is a degradation of the art form, some cheap, lowbrow gutter version of real humor. It is the foundation. The art form got more sophisticated around the edges, in wordplay, in timing, in cultural references. But the emotional plumbing underneath never changed, and the oldest material we have proves it. When we tell a crude joke today, we are not lowering comedy to our level. We are standing exactly where our ancestors stood, and we've been standing there for a very long time. Now, here is where it gets strange, because the same impulse shows up independently in ancient Egypt, in a completely different civilization that never once saw a Sumerian clay tablet. The Egyptians wrote humor down too, and their jokes are scattered through schoolboy exercise texts, through letters between scribes, through stories that were copied and recopied for centuries. There is a well-known example, a letter that survived from the Egyptian New Kingdom, in which an older scribe spends page after page mercilessly mocking his younger colleague for being incompetent, for having written a terrible piece of work, for being embarrassingly bad at his job. It is a roast. It is workplace comedy between two scribes, thousands of years before the internet gave us a platform for exactly that. You can feel the older man's smug satisfaction as he savages the younger one for his mistakes. The genre of passive-aggressive professional mockery is old, and Egypt had it down cold. And then there is the princess. The most famous Egyptian laughter story is a tale about a princess who refuses to laugh at anything, no matter what anyone does. She has been raised with every advantage, every comfort, and none of it makes her smile, which drives her entire court to distraction, because a laughing girl was understood as a healthy, normal, socially functioning girl. So the whole story becomes a kind of puzzle. How do you get this one stubborn person to crack? And eventually, in the way these stories always work, an arrangement is found. Some clever bit of business that finally gets her laughing. And the point of the story is not really the trick itself. The point is the premise. A person who would laugh was a problem to be solved. A princess who could be made to laugh was practically a medical case. So important that a whole civilization built an elaborate story around the project of getting one girl to smile. That tells you something very real about how the ancients thought about laughter. It wasn't a luxury, an optional add-on that you got to when you had spare time. It was expected. It was social glue, so central to a functioning life that its absence was treated as a defect. Laughter wasn't decoration. It was a sign that you were properly, healthily, humanly connected to the people around you. And if you weren't doing it, something was wrong with you. And once you start looking, you find the actual joke book. One of the oldest surviving joke collections in the world is a Greek book called the Philogelos, which translates to the laughter lover. It survives in manuscripts that date to perhaps the 4th or 5th century AD, though the jokes inside are almost certainly older, passed down, and collected like any long-running stand-up routine. And these jokes are so recognizable that reading them in translation is genuinely unsettling. Here is one. A man tells his friends he is going to the market to buy a corpse to sell at a profit. That is a bit about somebody being wildly overconfident in their own business sense, certain of a scheme that is obviously doomed. Here is another. An absent-minded professor locks himself out of his own house, complains that he has forgotten his key, and then adds, "Oh wait, I remember now. I didn't lock the door. He was never locked out to begin with. He forgot that he forgot to lock it." The professor was a staple character in the Philogelos, the eternal butt of the jokes, the ancient equivalent of the preoccupied academic, or the know-it, all who is blind to what is right in front of him. Those jokes could be dropped into a university cafeteria in 2026, and absolutely nobody would bat an eye. Same character, same failure, same laugh. The costume changed, the punchline didn't, That is the pattern that should slow you down, because it is the whole argument of this video sitting right there in a 1500-year-old Greek joke book. The jokes change costumes, but the characters and their failures do not change. The cowardly husband, the clueless expert, the boastful fool, the person who borrows trouble and then complains about the bill. These are the same masks comedy has always worn, and they are still the masks we wear today. Now, philosophy has been chewing on this for a long time, and the theories about why we laugh can be sorted into a few big families. One family says laughter is about feeling superior, that we laugh when we feel someone else is below us, the fool getting his comeuppance, the professor being revealed as an idiot. That is called the superiority theory, and it goes back to thinkers like Plato and Hobbes. Another family says laughter is relief, that it vents built-up nervous energy and tension, which is why the pressure cooker of a tense joke ending in a silly punchline feels so good. That is the relief theory, championed by Herbert Spencer and later given a famous psychological treatment by Sigmund Freud, who wrote a whole book called Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious. And the third family is the one most modern comedy scholars lean on, and it is called the incongruity theory. The short version, as Immanuel Kant put it in the 18th century, is that laughter comes from a sudden transformation of a strained expectation into nothing. You build up an expectation, the joke knocks it sideways, and the gap between what you expected and what you got is where the laugh lives. Arthur Schopenhauer said something similar, that laughter arises when the concept and the real thing that falls under it suddenly don't match. And Henry Bergson, in his book on laughter, argued that we laugh at life when it looks mechanical, when a person behaves like a machine, getting stuck, repeating, failing to adapt, which is exactly why the absent-minded professor in the Philogelos is so funny. He is a person running on a stuck loop. Here is the thing about these old theories. They line up shockingly well with what the oldest jokes are doing. The Sumerian fart joke is a pure incongruity. The grand solemn frame collides with the tiny rude reality, and the collision is the comedy. The Egyptian scribe roast is pure superiority, one professional lording it over a humiliated junior, and the Philogelos professor is pure Bergson, a human being behaving like a stuck machine. So the ancients weren't just telling jokes. They were, without knowing it, demonstrating every major theory of humor that philosophers would write down thousands of years later. Now, here is where the science steps in, and it changes how we read all of this. The researcher Robert Provine, who studied laughter for decades at the University of Maryland, found something that runs against every stand-up comedian self-image. Laughter is mostly not a response to jokes at all. When Provine and his students followed people around, listening to real conversations, real social life, and noting every single laugh, they found that only a small fraction of the laughter they recorded was triggered by anything remotely funny. Most of it happened in ordinary conversation, after throwaway comments during pauses, as a social signal rather than as a reaction to a punchline. The average person laughs many times a day, and almost never at actual jokes. Provine's point, and it is a good one, is that laughter is a social emotion that brings people together and increases interaction. It is a form of bonding, and for deep roots you have to go past the joke, down into the brain, and recognize the sound evolved long before we had language, let alone punchlines. That is the real payload of this whole video, and it changes the way you read the ancient jokes completely. The Sumerian fart joke isn't really the point. The point is that the machinery that produces the laugh is ancient beyond the reach of any written record. Chimpanzees and other great apes make a panting, open-mouthed sound during play that researchers consider the direct precursor to human laughter. It is not a joke. It is a signal. It says this is play. This is not a threat. I am with you. Keep going. I am not trying to hurt you. And somewhere along the evolutionary road that breathy play signal got upgraded into the loud, contagious, full-body laughter that can sweep through a whole room and turn strangers into a pack in a matter of seconds. When two people laugh together, something real and physical is happening in their bodies. And the researchers who study this have given it a name and a purpose. Robin Dunbar, an evolutionary psychologist at Oxford, has argued that laughter works for humans the way grooming works for other primates, a low-cost, efficient way to trigger the brain's reward chemistry and bind a group together. But grooming has a problem. It only works one-on-one, and it takes time and attention. Laughter is contagious. It spreads through a crowd in seconds, doing in a single moment what grooming would take an entire evening to accomplish. It is a group bonding tool that scales, and that scalability is precisely what made it so valuable to a species that survives by cooperating in large groups. That reframes everything, and I want you to hold on to it. The joke is the vehicle, not the end. The destination is a room full of strangers suddenly acting like a pack, their brains bathing in the same reward chemicals, all of them signaling, in perfect sync, that they are safe with each other. The punchline is just the excuse the room uses to get there. But why this particular machinery? Why would evolution build a shortcut that lets a whole group sync up their emotions almost instantly? Here is the uncomfortable part. Because it was a survival tool. Early humans needed trust in a hurry with strangers, in settings where one miscalculation could get you hurt or left behind. Bonding a stranger into the group with a shared laugh was, in some ways, worth more than a good weapon, because a group that laughs together cooperates, and cooperating means it eats, protects, and passes on its genes. Laughter was the glue that made large-scale cooperation possible. So laughter is a group cohesion tool dressed up as entertainment. And once you see it that way, the 4,000-year-old fart joke starts to make sense as the obvious design rather than its failure. Comedy that aims at the body, at marriage, at status panic, at death, is all aimed at the same stuff that keeps us anxious and alive, and sharing it out loud is how the group says those fears are okay to have in public together. Now, hold on, because there is a counterweight you should feel, because it makes the whole system stranger and more interesting. If a joke is just a bonding trigger, then why are some jokes so bad that they destroy a room? Why does a misjudged line land with a thud and leave everyone colder than they were before? Because the machinery cuts both ways. Laughter is a read of the group's mood, a consensus device. When the room laughs together, it is calibrating. We are all tuned to the same frequency. We are all on the same page. When the room goes quiet, it is a calibration failure. We are not all on the same page, and somebody badly misread the room. That is why dying on stage as a comic is such a specific kind of horror. It is not just that the bit failed, it is that the person was publicly revealed to be out of sync with everyone around them. The group's shared signal failing in real time. And that connects straight back to the ancients, to that Egyptian princess who would laugh. A person who refuses the contract, who won join the calibration, is a threat to the cohesion of the group, which is exactly why the culture treated her as a problem to be solved, rather than a quirk to be tolerated. Laughter is a pledge, and the person who won make the pledge unsettles everyone around them. So what does all of this mean for how we understand our own sense of humor, and for the fact that we still, after 4,000 years, laugh at the same things a Mesopotamian scribe found funny? The honest answer is that the topics haven't changed, because the human animal hasn't changed. We still have bodies that betray us. We still have marriages that frustrate us. We still have egos that get punctured in front of other people. And we still have that desperate, ancient need to be on the same side as the people around us, to know that we belong, to prove it out loud. Comedy is the oldest social technology, and still the fastest one we have, even in a world of infinite content and delivery systems. Here is the thing that gets me though, and it is why I wanted to make this video in the first place. The same crude joke that made a Sumerian scribe smile 4,000 years ago is being sent right now. at this exact moment, in a group chat, to someone who loves you, and they are going to laugh. And part of the reason they're going to laugh is because they love you, not because the joke is good. And that, more than any punchline ever written, is the whole point of the entire apparatus. The joke is just the excuse the two of you use to do the ancient thing, which is to say, out loud and in public, that you belong to each other, that we belong to each other. So the next time you are in a room and somebody tells a joke so bad, it almost hurts, watch what happens. People groan, then they laugh, then they relax, and strangers become a little less strange. That is not a failure of comedy. That is the oldest trick our species has, working exactly as designed. The groan is the setup, the laugh is the twist, the relaxation is the payoff. And the next time you get a meme about a husband, a wife, and something that should not have been said, remember the clay tablet? Remember the Sumerian scribe who carved a fart joke into stone? Remember the Egyptian princess who was considered broken because she would laugh? Remember the Greek professor who locked himself out of a house he never locked in the first place? You are not laughing because you have better material than they did. You are laughing because they were already laughing at the exact same things, and because laughter is how a species that cannot survive alone keeps finding, over and over again, the family it carries inside itself. The joke is 4,000 years old. The need is older than that.